So there's a U.S. congressional resolution calling for the annulment of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, here's the thing. I will say before I get into this article that the answer is no. 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 So I don't really have to read the article in that regard, but you'll see the article has a lot of important things in it outside of just, are we seeing the end of the, no, we're not, because the truth is this thing in Congress could pass. It won't, could pass, and it wouldn't matter. The ruling elite, the Biden administration, Trump administration, the Obama administration, doesn't matter. One of the administrations, whoever's in office, they don't care about whether Congress, if you were to get a progressive Congress that said, we no longer stand for the Monroe Doctrine, they would keep acting exactly the same. Nothing would change in terms of U.S. policy, not to mention the presidency is not really in control of the military-industrial complex. I mean, it largely runs pretty much the same no matter what. But again, this article is still interesting. 200 years after after President James Monroe first promulgated his dictate, giving the Yankees dominion of the rest of the hemisphere, a congressional resolution calls for annulling the Monroe Doctrine and replacing it with a new good neighbor policy. The intent is to foster improved relations and deeper, more effective cooperation with our neighbor nations. Now, many of you know that the Monroe Doctrine is the idea that Latin America essentially belongs to the United States. The Monroe Doctrine is, well, it's our front yard. So anything happens anything that happens to Latin America is therefore our responsibility. It impacts us. So we get to decide everything that goes on in Latin America. This has then led to generations of just the U.S. destroying in one form or another Latin American countries. And we're going to get to that list, long list in a second. But whether they pass this or not, it wouldn't change the way the United States behaves. The United States is an empire that is all about controlling of other nations. Most importantly, Latin America, one of the most important is Latin America because it is so close to us, it's economically tied to us, and we want to be able to exploit their resources almost more than anywhere else in the world. So that is why Venezuela, for example, is so furiously upsetting to the ruling elite in the United States. Even if you hate Maduro and you hate socialist aspects of the country, even if you just hate Venezuela, you see a photo of Venezuela and you go, blah. Even if that were all the case, why care? Why care what other countries are doing? Why not let them do their thing? Why not let them live their lives? Why not let them live how they want to live? And the reason is because the U.S. needs, in order to continue this unfettered, just ravenous capitalist domination of the environment and the world, you have to have resources that are pumped into that machine constantly, and those have to come from somewhere. And Latin America is where we get a lot of them. So it's not really about. There's a little bit about socialism in that we don't want America. The ruling elite in the United States don't want Americans looking down at Latin America and going, why do they get health care? Now, we still do that some, but anyway. Let's see. While the Monroe Doctrine ingeniously claimed to protect hemispheric independence from foreign interference, H.R. 943 charges that the policy has, in fact, been used as a mandate to give the U.S. license to interfere in the internal affairs of other states to promote its own narrow interests. The resolution forcefully begins with noting massive forced displacement and genocide of native peoples by the North American colonialists. That's a good start. Might want to mention that. The resolution goes on to enumerate the further progression of the U.S. imperium on the hemisphere. So now I'm going to get into some of this list. Because why not go through it, you know? And we'll see how many of those you knew about. I knew about, I don't know, most of them, but I only found out about most of them in the past like 5 years. So I did not grow up like informed on these things because it's hidden from our history lessons, isn't it? Back in the 1840s, the U.S. took 55% of Mexico. In 1890, actually, I covered that recently on my podcast, Government Secrets, if you want to hear that episode. In 1898, Puerto Rico, still possessed, and Cuba, Guantanamo still controlled, were seized. From 1898 to 1934, Washington intervened militarily in Cuba, Panama, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. In 1904, international police power to protect the United States and foreign creditors in the region was claimed under the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. In 1947, the CIA was created with authorization for covert action in Latin America. Then in 1953, Guantanamo President Jacobo Arbenz was overthrown in the first CIA coup. In 1961, the U.S. facilitated a 21-year military dictatorship in Brazil. The following year, the still continuing embargo of Cuba was initiated. In 1973, Washington backed a coup in Chile, and the succeeding 15-year military dictatorship. And in 1973, we didn't just back a coup in Chile. We also suicided Allende, one of the most socialist leaders of Latin America. From 1975 to 1980, the U.S. coordinated Operation Condor with terroristic military dictatorships in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. In 1983, the U.S. invaded and overthrew the government of Grenada. And in the 1980s and early 1990s, the U.S. backed dirty wars in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. In 1991, the U.S. covertly financed a military coup in Haiti. Another coup in Haiti in 2004. Starting in 2000, billions were provided for Plan Colombia, implicated in massive human rights abuses. Meanwhile, 1941 to 2003, U.S. naval operations in VK, Puerto Rico, caused death and lethal illnesses. 2002, the U.S. supported an unsuccessful coup in Venezuela. U.S.-backed coups in Honduras in 2009, Bolivia, 2019. And it actually leaves out some of the more recent ones, such as Peru. We just were pivotal in their lawfare coup. Also Argentina, which has now gone far right wing. We successfully perpetrated a lawfare coup against Argentina's vice president. Now, the reason that mattered, why does the vice president matter, is because she was hugely popular and left-wing, and she was going to run for president, and she would have won. So Argentina would have had a left-wing president again. The U.S. didn't want that. So what we did was we manufactured bullshit charges. She was found guilty because she's over a certain age in Argentina. She doesn't serve any jail time, but what it does do is mean that legally she's not allowed to run for president. She couldn't run for president, and far right wing gets into power in Argentina. Yay, United States. Although this amounts to an appalling rap sheet, the resolution just highlights some of the more obvious transgressions. Omitted, for instance, is the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama and overthrow of that government. So yeah, this list, although it took me about 5 minutes to go through, is actually not exhaustive. There is an endless number. I mean, for example, they didn't even mention the I believe is it 200 some attempted assassinations of Fidel Castro that have now been revealed. The CIA attempted to assassinate Fidel Castro for years and years and years. Many of the attempts have been revealed. You can even read them on the neoliberal history of the world, Wikipedia, where the CIA tried to do things like give Fidel Castro a poison scuba suit, exploding cigars, exploding conch shells. Anyway, they tried just about everything. And he died of old age.